It's kind of wild to think about, but your body is basically a super complex, high performance machine. And just like any machine, it's got a dashboard, one that's always sending out signals about how everything's running. So let's figure out how to actually read that thing and finally understand.
What is your body trying to tell you? All those little signals, a faster heartbeat, feeling a bit warm, maybe being short of breath. What do they really mean? Deciphering those messages can be tricky, and that's exactly what we're going to break down in this explainer.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about the dashboard itself. Then we'll get into the key gauges: heat, rhythm, breath, and pressure. We'll even check the oxygen gauge. And finally, we'll put it all together to see how to read the full report. Okay, section 1, your body's dashboard. Let's start right at the beginning.
So this is the big idea right here. Vital signs are exactly what they sound like. They are signs that are vital for life. Seriously, they're the most fundamental measurements that doctors and nurses use to get a really quick but really powerful snapshot of your overall health. All right, let's move on to heat and rhythm. Just think of these as your body's engine temperature and its RPMs.
First up is temperature. This is a constant balancing act. Your body is always, and I mean always, working to make just enough heat, but also to get rid of any extra. It's like your own personal built-in thermostat.
And the signals here, they're crystal clear. Normal is a really tight range, right between 36.5 and 37 degrees Celsius. If your engine starts to overheat, that's a fever, the classic sign your body's battling an infection. And if it runs too cold, well, that's hypothermia, which is a super serious warning sign that you've been exposed to cold or are in shock.
Next, let's talk about the pulse, or your heart rate. This is the speed of your engine. Every single time you feel that little thump, that's your heart contracting and pumping life-giving blood to every part of your body. For most adults just chilling out, the normal range is somewhere between 60 and 100 beats per minute. If it's revving too high, over 100, that's called tachycardia, often caused by that fever we talked about or even just stress. And if it's too slow, below 60, that's bradycardia, which can signal a heart problem. Although interestingly, it's also pretty normal for elite athletes, whose hearts are just incredibly efficient. Okay, you with me? Let's keep building on this with our next set of gauges: breath and pressure. We can think of these as our system's exhaust flow and its oil pressure.
Your respiratory rate. It's just a fancy way of saying how many breaths you take in 1 minute. Sounds simple, right? But it's actually a huge indicator of how hard your body is working to pull in the oxygen it needs to survive.
And measuring it is really straightforward. You just watch the chest rise and fall, count the breaths for 30 seconds, and then double that number. Here's a little insider secret. Clinicians often do this while they're pretending to check your pulse. Why? So you don't start thinking about your breathing and change the pattern. Pretty clever, huh?
So for a resting adult, that sweet spot is about 12 to 20 breaths a minute. If you're breathing too fast, that's called tachypnea. It could be a sign of an infection like pneumonia. Breathing too slow, that's bradypnea, and it's a major red flag for some serious stuff, like a drug overdose. And now for blood pressure, our system's oil pressure. It's always measured with two numbers. The top number, the systolic, is the pressure when your heart is actively squeezing. That's the max force. The bottom number, diastolic, is the pressure when your heart is relaxed, in between beats.
Man, understanding where you fall in this chart is so critical for your long-term health. The ideal target is below 120/80. As those numbers start to creep up into the elevated and then hypertension stages, your risk for heart disease and stroke goes way, way up.
All right, we've got one last gauge to check: oxygen. This one's often called the fifth vital sign, and it's kind of like checking the engine's fuel-to-air mixture.
So oxygen saturation, or SpO2, tells us what percentage of the hemoglobin in your red blood cells is actually carrying oxygen. To put it simply, it's a grade on how well oxygen is getting from your lungs to the rest of your body. This chart makes it super clear. What you're aiming for is 95 to 100%. Perfect. But if that number drops below 90%, that's a condition called hypoxemia. And that is a serious warning sign that your body isn't getting enough oxygen. And it almost always means you need immediate medical help. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle: reading the full report. Because see, no single gauge tells the whole story. The real magic happens when you see how they all work together. So take a look at this chart with me. At 8 in the morning, a single snapshot. Looks pretty good, right? But watch the trend by noon. The temperature is up just a bit. The pulse and breathing are a little faster, and oxygen has dipped. Now, on their own, each of these changes is pretty small, but together, oh, they tell a story. The story of a body that's just starting to fight something off. This is how you spot a problem before it really blows up. Which really brings us to the core truth of this quote right here. These simple, basic measurements are incredibly powerful tools. Mastering them isn't just about reading numbers on a screen, it's about catching problems before they turn into full-blown crises.
So, I want you to remember this. Your body's dashboard is always on. It's constantly streaming data 24/7. The real question isn't whether the signals are there, it's are you paying attention to them?